say that I'm grateful for being invited to share thoughts about what happens in our church in Africa and what is happening. Like he said, the church is the same, but the differences bring up growth and then enhance it. So this evening, what that I'm going to share with you is the literature that is available, the figures that are available, and then share a few thoughts as far as I am concerned as a priest from Africa, and what other people have also observed as far as the church in Africa is concerned. So that's what I'm going to do. I have been a teacher, so I can talk for long. Pardon me if I go that route, but I'll try as much as possible to make it more interactive. I told him that I'm not going to be very long, but after putting thoughts together, I realized that I've written something that you need to hear, and then afterwards we'll go to question and answers and know exactly what it is about. So, looking at the church in Africa and the church in America, as we said, unique, but the same church. We know Roman Catholic Church is universal. But we must also understand that this being universal also makes it very particular. It is particular because of the cultures in which the faith is practiced. So that's where the differences will come, the uniqueness will come, but the order and everything is almost the same. So therefore we can talk about, because of the cultural differences, we can talk about American church and African church because of the different cultures. I am not an American, I'm an African. And so some of the things that I may do that may sound very offensive. There will be other things that you may also do that may sound offensive in African, but in African culture I cannot talk to the elder with my left hand. The question is that why? We'll go into that later, not now. So like I said, they are all unique, but very particular. But in this presentation, I'll try to dwell on the uniqueness of the African church, and that uniqueness that enhances growth. We know, we can't hide anything. I'm going to open up wounds here. We know what is happening in the world, in Africa and in Europe and America. I'm going to talk about issues. So I'm dwelling so much on the uniqueness of African church, and that uniqueness that enhances growth, as we know and all we have all seen. So that is what I'm going to do. A typical African is a cultural man or a person, cultural person. A typical African is a cultural person who would express themselves through music, art, drumming and dancing, and sculpture. These things are deeply ingrained into our culture. So there is no way you get into Africa and you would attend an event and you won't find people sing, you won't find people drum, you won't find people clap and dance. The drumming always goes with dancing. So that is what a typical African is. So Africans are also said to be overly religious. They always believe that there is a reason for whatever happens. And they would always assign reasons, if they are Christians, to God Almighty. If they are not Christians, they will assign you to whatever they believe in. So Africans are overly religious. They will use proverbs and songs to express their reverence and gratitude to God. In everyday life, singing. I may have a bad voice, but a typical African can sing the appellations of God to tell who God is. We do that. So, singing and drumming are common features in come to the church every liturgical celebration. Prayers are usually spontaneous. An African will not be called to lead the prayer of the faithful and is written for him. He comes, he's invited to that go pray for the church. He has to be spontaneous and pray, but very succinct, direct, and he speaks exactly what he wants to do, because the culture makes the person that way. So the African continent is very big, as there are about 54 countries. different many cultures. There have been the move to have United States of Africa, USA, the same as United States of America. But we have not gotten there. So you have different many cultures. And then because of the different many cultures that we have different many liturgical rites for the celebration of the same Mass. So my culture is called the Fantis. The Fantis have their rite for celebration of Mass. It is not different from other cultures, but it is done in such a way. The order of the Mass, like I said, is the same as you find in America. The order, everything is the same, but a bit different. When African goes to Mass, we have always been accused of spending all the time at Mass. I will explain why. Because it makes a difference. The Mass is, but in African context, it's a bit different because of how elaborate the celebration is done to typify an African before a supreme being. When African before something that he calls a supreme being, it's not just something that I'm going to do it quick and go back. It's not hit and run kind of thing. You have all the time because you consider him to be the maker of everything. He is your supreme being. You don't just rush, go, hit and go back. You need to spend time, a bit of time, and that reflects in the way we celebrate. So Catholic faith in the African continent has always been said to be the Christianity of the 21st century. The African church is young, vibrant, and growing and demographically dominant. So if you look at the churches in Africa, you see it, and we'll go to the figures. In fact, in the African church, the church in Africa is growing at an alarming rate, whereas the opposite is what we see here. If you look at these figures, the whole of Africa, you have some countries that are predominantly Muslims. If you go to Egypt and the others, they are predominantly, the Christian community is so small. But these are the figures that you may want to think about. With 172 million faithful, the sub-Saharan Africa represents 16% of the Catholics worldwide. Just 172 million. That is what it represents. There are explosive growths in many churches in Africa to the extent that we are running out of rooms in the seminaries, convents, and monasteries because of the rising vocations. And the laity are collectively practicing their faith in ways that put the West to shame. Why do I make that point? Because you evangelize us, right? You brought the faith. The West brought the faith to Africa. Now it looks like the tables are turned. So they live their faith, saying that to prove to them that, hey, we have arrived, we are doing well. So they do everything to prove to the West that, hey, this is what we are doing. For example, in Nigeria alone, 94% of Catholics go to Mass every weekend. Just 6 don't go. So I'm going to focus, some of the examples will come from Nigeria and a few others, because we share boundaries with Nigeria. Only 3 countries in the western part of Africa that speak English. The rest of them are all speaking French. So when I meet a Nigerian on the street, I am able to know that is a Nigerian because of the accent. Just as you tell me I have an accent. I can tell. I am also able to tell somebody he has an accent. But a Nigerian will meet a Ghanaian and tell you are my brother. He doesn't know you from anywhere. But the fact that you are this, you speak English and he tells you are my brother. And that is the kind of thing that, so 94% of Catholics in Nigeria go to Mass every week. But here in the United States, we cannot claim of even 30%, right? Who go to Mass. If you look at the weekly Mass attendance score of Nigeria, Kenya, and Democratic Republic of Congo alone is 80 million every Sunday. And which is 25% more than all of Europe, North America, including America combined. And these are figures that you can always check and find out. So if you look at what is happening in Africa, you wonder what is really the thing that is driving them. According to the Population Research Bureau, by 2050, African Catholics will grow by 146%. By 2050, African Catholics will grow by 146%, making Africa the most Catholic continent after Latin America. Europe and America, meanwhile, will decline by -6%. So that's in 2050. So it tells us that we will have a job to do to ensure that the church does not collapse. Because we cannot afford to tell God that it was our time that the church came to not exist. How would we tell God this? So you have a duty, I have a duty, all of us who are members of the church today, American Catholics, have a duty to ensure that the church does not die. In that year, 2050, Democratic Republic of Congo will become the most Catholic country, and it would have double as many faithfuls as they will have in Poland. Poland used to be one of the countries that was almost 100% Catholic. Today, what is happening there, I don't know. The World Christian Database estimates that by 2050 again, African Catholics will make up 32% of Catholic globally. 2050, so the projection is that by then, that is what will happen. Because of this, because of these trends and these developments, in July 2022, Pope Francis publicly admitted it when he said, Africa never ceases to surprise us for the future of the churches in Africa. Are we going to get a pope from Africa? I don't know. We have had one, yes, if you go to history, but are we going to have one in this recent time? I don't know. But that's what Pope Francis says. Bishop Robert Barron, one renowned speaker, American prelate, says that he described African church as a robust exemplar. For him, the universal church should not be so worried about the church in Germany. Recent time there have been talk about Germany trying to go against the church and all of it. He says that, hey, don't worry yourself about Germany. I'd rather be worried about the church in Africa because the church in Europe is dying. But I don't agree with him. If it is dying, doesn't mean that we should let it die. No. There should be an intervention to make sure that if it's dead, we can resurrect it. But that's what this renowned man says. And so for Bishop Barron, Pope Francis's call to go to the periphery is an invitation to re-evangelize Europe and America. When Pope Francis says go to the periphery, for him, he feels that there is no place like periphery than going back to Europe and America to re-evangelize them. He calls on the Senate of the Universal Church to look at the African Church and learn from their examples. There are a lot to learn. Asked whether the Africans' numerical strength translates to ecclesiastical influence. Interesting, listen to what Bishop Barron says. He says that the condescending attitude of Europe and America has always been the problem. They would always look down on them. No. So they are so condescending that they don't want to recognize that these things are happening. And so he cited an example of, he said that he himself was at a synod on the family in Rome in 2015. And in that synod, theologians from Europe and America all admitted and agreed that there seemed to be growth in Africa. And you know what he said to them? We recognize that there are growth. We recognize that your church is doing well. But in this synod, you must listen to us as you listen to us all the time. With that condescending attitude. Your church is dying. Others are doing well. And you still say because you have the power, you have the muscles, all that they could tell them is that, hey, we recognize that. Are you sure? Listen to us. But the question is that the synod was on family, right? On family, where there are Africans cherish family a lot. Honestly, I must be frank with you. I've shared this with the Kinjo and others that it will be hard in a traditional African home to have somebody on the street. Because you have the family support. You can always go to live with an auntie or your grandmother, and you will still be at home. So when they went for the synod on the family, and the talk was listen to us who are losing our values on families, then it was something to wonder about. And so for him, he feels that, so Jabaran concedes that he will listen to and learn from African theologians than a European one, because the Africans creatively reflect the life experience of the church. For him, theology must reflect the life of the church, and this has been ignored for a very long time. He said, as a church, we must begin to look at what the Spirit is up to in the church and act accordingly. Do we feel the Spirit in the church? Is the Spirit moving us to do things? Yes. But maybe we are not looking at it. So now, I just want to walk you through what accounts for successes in evangelization in the African church. What can the church in the United States learn from Africa and vice versa? But like I said, my emphasis will be, I will be a bit biased here because I'm an African. So I'm just going to look at, I said, the uniqueness of African church and those unique active features that enhances growth, that maybe the church, particularly in America, is losing sight of. The one first key feature that comes to mind is that the African church still maintains the primacy of the supernatural in the church. Primacy of the supernatural in the church is one key fact. I told you the Africans are overly religious, and so they will not play with what is supernatural. So it is still maintained in the church. The church announces God's existence, Jesus as a savior of the world, the fact of salvation through the sacraments, and the fact of salvation through the sacraments and holding to eternal life as our goal of salvation. All of these things are done through the supernatural, right? If I want to share with anybody about who God is, who His Son is, obviously that is the medium through which I should present these things of the church. And so, when you take away supernatural out, the Mass, the sacrament, through evangelization, collapse. And all we do is just natural or ordinary. When we reduce supernatural to natural, religion collapses. Yes. If we go to church without recognizing that what we are doing is within the space of supernatural, we are doing just ordinary, we are just going through motions. And any time we do that, religion collapses. It flattens out, and it becomes less compelling. It becomes less compelling. If nobody feels that there's some power, there's something that is pushing us to do, there's some unseen hand that we have come to do what we are doing, then everybody comes and there isn't any fear. That's why I said it becomes less compelling. People can choose to go or not. And unfortunately, this may be the case that we are seeing here. In the African church, we see the supernatural quality as the basis of the life of the church. The conversion of the African Christians from their primitive religions is more recent and direct. It's very recent. Yet, what is happening? According to John Allen Jr., in his book, The Future Church, published in 2009, this is what he says. The African Catholic is likely to blend orthodox, historical, and biblical theology, fully engaged with the supernatural. That's what an African will do. If the African is going to church, if the African believes in something, he's likely to be orthodox, he's actually to go to history, and he's going to look at what does the Bible put it, and fully engage in the supernatural. The African is likely to believe in the reality of exorcism. How many of you believe that we can cast out demons? Many of you may think that it's normal. We have to reason. But African believes in the reality of exorcism. An African believes in healing. An African believes in the gift of the Holy Spirit that are seen in the charismatic style of worship. The African believes in all of this because of the background where he's coming from. So there's a problem when we try to naturalize the supernatural. The church becomes the echo of a wider culture where the people don't care so much about what is sacred, what is godly. This type of church is no longer invited. It won't bring people. Because the people are always rationalizing. They don't care about what is sacred. It becomes the echo of a wider society. That's what the society thinks we should do, so everybody goes to do it. But you know what? The mandate of the church is to proclaim a supernatural message which should compel people to navigate towards their Maker. But sometimes the thought is that since people will not easily accept the supernatural, let us dissolve it into the natural categories for acceptance. And we see this happening. Let us dissolve it so that people would accept it. But as a church, our mandate is not to please people, but to preach the gospel in and out of season. Whether the people accept it or not, our mandate is to ensure that we are not there to please people. We should not change the message of salvation in order to accommodate the culture. And this has been the thing that is going on. Let us not play the game of reducing supernatural to natural to make the church appealing. Rather, we become more appealing being supernatural. Because we must always let people know that what we gather to do is unseen. People must feel that in what they do. There is an empirical evidence that shows that an attempt to naturalize supernatural has always failed. When it comes to religion, if all that you do is to rationalize things and try to find mind to explain everything, that is where religion is failing. Very soon it will become the practice of the people. Number two feature characteristics or uniqueness about the African church is that it holds fast to what is theological and morally orthodox. The African church, an African would always do that. And again, Bishop Baron has this to say when he calls this an affirmative orthodoxy. That's what he calls it. He puts it so nicely when he says that it is an affirmative orthodoxy. And this he explains as this: the correct belief, which is presented in a way that is affirmative. That is an affirmative, the correct belief, the what we believe in, what the church teaches. We present it like that to people, to affirm that this is what we believe in. We have always affirm, whether it will make people happy or not, we affirm it. When we do this, the church becomes more compelling. People may reject orthodoxy, but bringing out its integrity and beauty makes it more inviting. I keep on using the word compelling and inviting. And that is what the church should seek to do. Whatever you do it in such a way that, because our call to bring people to the kingdom must be a drive to invite people, must be a drive to compel them to move from where they are to the church. So that's why I keep on stressing the word compelling and inviting. Sometimes people may argue that culture of the time should make the church change what we believe in. We know it's happening. But the church has always accommodated what is called healthy inculturation. The church assimilates what she believes in from the culture. And as a living organism making her way through history, affirms what she believes, what she can, and resists what she must. The church will not accept anything. If it was the case, the church will not be what it is today. The African church allows dancing and drumming in every liturgical celebration because that is what the people through their culture are identified with. That's who you are. You cannot change me. If I want to worship God and do it well, I should do it with who I am. I should not pretend to be doing something else, but I should be able to do it in such a way that it is godly. And so when we allow drumming and dancing in liturgical celebrations, because that's what the people are, we express ourselves as Africans that way when we are at worship. Whether it is traditional African religion, whether it is Catholic African worship, you express yourself that way. The African believes that the Mass is the highest form of worship. And I'm sure Americans believe so. That's what the Catholics we are told. The highest form of worship, according to Catechism, according to Vatican II document, is that it's the highest form of worship. The African believes it. And so we want to celebrate it with all joys, amidst songs, drumming, dancing, and using every available musical instrument. In fact, I've said this before, that no African goes to Mass and returns home sad. So in spite of all our problems of life, we see the Mass as an occasion to be happy in the Lord and to celebrate with people. Is that what happens here? Sometimes it's just like individual things when we go to Mass. We do our things and we go. There's no connection. We are building a community of faith, a community of believers. So an African goes to Mass, and I tell you this, during the kiss of peace, can walk from here to the end of the church to go and shake somebody's hand. Here what we see is this. Is that not what we see? That's what we see. Somebody stands by you, you cannot be strength to shake the person. I know maybe COVID is changing, COVID is making these things, but did you come to celebrate together or you came to celebrate as an individual? But African goes to church, so that explains why sometimes it's long. We go to Mass, we don't sit for baskets for collection pass around. It never happened. It will not be in the blood of an African. You have to put the basket in front there. Everybody gets up from the pew and dance to put the collection in the bowl. You rejoice because you are celebrating together. It's a moment for you to be happy in the Lord. So to sit, I remember when I went to Canada for the first time, I said, no, I don't belong here. I felt odd. The first time I went to Canada, I said, what is this place? That you go to Mass, and it's only one person who stands behind the microphone and sings. What is not a celebration that all of us have come to do, right? So why can't people join together and sing as a choir? Today we are losing all of them. Today people who even know how to play the piano no longer want to play. Today people who belong to the choir don't want to. In China they have put it in the bulletin how many years we are going to have choir rehearsals. And people don't show up. But the point is that, you see, when we go to Mass, I've always said that it is our celebration and not anybody's celebration. And that's why the church would always call for active participation. So the active participation means that if I am a priest, I should know what I'm supposed to do. I should not pretend to be doing everything. I should give room for altar servers to play their role. I should give room for people who are elected to do theirs. I should allow deacons to play their role. I should have those who are singing to do theirs. I should have ushers to play their role. Because it is our collective worship. And it's not one person. When you say, others do it for us. What about you? In China, there have always been problems getting people to carry the offering gifts. So what is the understanding? It is our offering. And our offering, anybody, people, I always want to look at, in my own country, people even struggle to want to carry it. Here, it's not my business, they never told me, nobody told me. So people hardly take initiative on the spot. Not until you ask them to do it, no, they won't. They will not do it. So the African will do this. One of the problems with Africa is that I'm not saying that all we do is well. The church has always condemned polygamy, right? It's a problem with the African church. Polygamy, where men marry more than one wife, right? The church is against it. The church has always been against it. But that has not prevented people from going to church. They find themselves in that state, but they still feel the need to go to church. So why is it that if it's a problem, it has rather not prevented them from going to church, but it would rather make them go? It doesn't mean that the church endorses it, but it's a process where you walk through people to come to understand that your state of life is not accepted by the church. And so you have to make sure that you get out of it. So that is the second one. The third one is that the African church is always committed to evangelizing the wider culture. We'll talk of culture. So the African church does not evangelize individuals. In our drive to evangelize people to become part of the church, we don't deal with individuals. So it's rather the culture, the people. In other words, the African church attempts are always made to Christianize the culture of the people. Make them do it right. So if it was done in the wrong way, go there, make sure that you explain it to them. You can allow them to do it the same, but change it and let them have a different understanding of what they do. So it's always an attempt to Christianize the culture. According to Pope St. John Paul II, to Christianize culture means bring the word of the gospel to where culture is formed. Being it entertainment, being it in the government, being it in the art, bring the gospel to them there. so that they can change what they are doing the right way. So you cannot evangelize abstract. It's always the people that you do. And it means that you target people who play pivotal role in the culture. This is what Bishop Barron again says. He uses two phrases to describe the phenomenon of this culture thing. He uses two phrases for the American and the African church. He uses the word hankering down for the American church. And this he explains by saying that American church is so comfortable in her present state to the extent that she's prepared to stay in that position to protect herself. So comfortable with where we are. I give you an example. Today, there are amongst priests, clergy, men, and lay people in America who are strongly against Africans working in their country. Meanwhile, you don't have the vocation. There are people, there are priests, it happens amongst priests, it happens among lay faithful who are against having Africans working as priests. But what have we come to do? We have only come to help. They are vehemently against having them work here. Meanwhile, you don't have a vocation. They prefer closing down parishes than having African priests evangelize them. So that few American priests can take care of few parishes with less work. You know it and I know it. It is something that is happening. Meanwhile, on the other hand, an African church would always dive in. You know what that means? This is another phrase that Bishop Barron uses. Dive in means that the African church would always start doing something new, exploring different ways of evangelizing the people. For example, in my country, Ghana, home visitation by priests and church members to lapsed Catholics and sick members is a big deal. You have to do it. If I get to know you are sick as a church member, and I get to know, and I don't visit, the person will have a problem with me. It's a big deal, right? You have to do it. Is that the case here? No. Having public programs to share our faith with non-Catholics as a form of primary evangelization is common in Africa. Like you would have other Pentecostal churches do crusades outside. We do it. In Africa, it's common. Parishes do that. It's a form of primary evangelization. Children ministry is well emphasized. Children groups are very active in parishes. Do we see the same thing here? Parents are overprotective. They don't want their kids to do what they are supposed to do. So how do we walk them up in the faith? How do we teach them to grow? So in Africa, the kids ministry, you allow the children to do everything in the church. I was in charge of my diocese for kids for 4 years. We have what we call the School of Jesus. We call them School of Jesus. All the kids belong to that. And twice a year, you allow the kids to do everything that adults do at Mass. In those celebrations for the Kids Week, Children's Week, the kids themselves will do their reading. The children themselves will bring their offertory. The children themselves will play drums in church. The children themselves will do everything that adults will do at Mass. Because the idea is catch them young, so that when they grow up, they will not run away. They will still live the faith. So that is what happens in Africa. The African church would always invite any of the international religious groups of the Universal Church who are ready to come on board with both human and financial resources in the work of evangelization. Africa is more open. Any religious group that wants to work in Africa, my bishop will welcome that group. will not prevent anybody if you want to come and work, because it's that bigger mandate that Jesus gave us. So if they are coming to help in evangelizing the people, no bishop would. No, and they would rather even invite people like that to come. Because, like we said, they have the financial muscle, right? These international groups. So they come, they build schools, they build hospitals, they build churches, and they take part. At the end of the day, when they are leaving, they don't leave with it, they leave them, and those becomes the property of the diocese. So, whereas others are preventing some from coming, we would always welcome them with open hands. But they come and they help in the work of evangelization. The fourth one, I'm only talking about 5 of them. The fourth one is what we call praise in public and criticize in private. You praise in public and you criticize in private. The African church seems to do better regarding this than the American church. We have a more united front than the American church, where they seem to be what I call infighting. I will explain that. For example, the African church was unanimous in condemning the blessing of gay marriages in diplomatic way, right? The Pope said it, but he found a nice way to tell the Pope, no, we don't agree with you on this. You are the head of the church. In a more diplomatic way, they said, Pope Francis, we do not agree with you. Our culture and our belief, and based on the Bible, we cannot do that. And that killed it in Africa. It will never came up again. But let's look at it when it happened here. There were a divided front among bishops and priests on this issue. Here in the United States, some publicly defended the matter and criticized those who were against it, and even went ahead to the extent of calling the Pope's names. Right? It happened publicly. People went out and said this. So could we as a church here have found a nice way of telling the Pope, no, we don't agree with you on this, without making it so public? So that's what I'm saying. That so. It's a worry and it affects the church. Bishop Barron has something to say that I will let you know soon. In this era of the internet and social media, it is easy to find some Catholics condemning some of the moral teachings of the church online. Some of the Catholics do that. Sometimes maybe some of us even do that by our conversation and everything. Where Catholics disagree with the leadership of the church on issues that border on salvation, and are not ready to listen to the work of the Holy Spirit in the church. It is quite common in the American church, sometimes bishops, priests, and lay people publicly disagree with and condemn the Pope. So if somebody is becoming a Catholic and sees those who are already in it doing this, will they invite the person to depart? Obviously no. A divided church cannot stand and no longer invite him. According to Bishop Barron, this has had devastating effects on the evangelization work of the church in the United States. If somebody wants to know more about the church and he goes online and checks and sees all that the person sees is this, the person may not even join. A divided church among her rank and file is counterproductive. It is counterproductive and will surely not be compelling to others. The first point I want to raise as a feature of the African church, unique feature of the African church that has enhanced growth, is being courageous in the face of opposition and hostility. In the face of opposition and hostility, the African church has always been courageous. According to the Vatican News Agency, over 50,000 Nigerian Catholics have been killed because of their faith in the past 15 years. 50,000. And 18 churches have been burnt down in the same period. This explains the church's understanding of the blood of the martyrs and the seed of the church. And that's why the church seemed to be growing. So one of the reasons for the growth of the church in Africa is that many Catholics have courage and stand firm for their faith. Even though the situation in Nigeria was tragic, it encourages many Catholics to hold on to their faith. Bishop Reverend calls Nigeria a holy place, where the real holiness of life of the church is exemplified. In God's providence, Nigeria plays that role of modern martyrs of the church so well that Nigeria becomes a model church because of their true witnessing that shows forth the power of the cross in modern times. So, all Catholics, all of us, I guess, all of us are included, should be willing to suffer for our faith. Because that is what Jesus meant when he said to us to pick up our crosses and follow him every day. That part leads to the cross. Some of us must carry our crosses in a very radical way, as seen in Nigeria. Priests in Africa go on trek. You go trekking. You move from one place to another. Because the church in Africa runs on what you call mission churches. We call it outstations. So you have the main station, and then you have the outstation. So when I started as a priest in 2004, I would leave home on Tuesday evening and come back on Sunday. So you have a priest who go for a trek for 1 week. You cross rivers with canoes. You drive through dangerous forests from one village to another to celebrate Mass for the people. Why do you have to worry yourself like that? But that's your calling, so you do that. You go, you stay with the people, sometimes in their houses. You visit them even on their farms during the day after Mass, and meet them again in the evening for teachings. Are the people not tired? They came for Mass in the morning. You won't let them be. As a priest, you wait for them in the evening to come for teachings. But that's what a priest does. So you go trekking from one place to another. The African is not ashamed of wearing what we call the religious articles in public. Like the rosary, the caplets and all of it. He's not afraid. I tell you a story. When I started last 2 years, I taught the 8th graders. And during Lent, I gave each one of them rosary and said, their project is to be reminded of the rosary to pray. And so I asked them, can you wear the rosaries around your neck? They said, no. They would not wear their rosary around their neck. So I asked them why. No, we don't want people to laugh at that. We don't want people to see that. And somebody told me that one of the priests or one of the sisters said, it is an offense to wear the rosary around your neck. I don't know. But if I'm supposed to share my faith with people, just how people wear medals, people wear scarlets under their clothes. If I wear it outside, why should it be an offense? Should I be afraid to tell people I'm a Catholic? So when you go to Africa and you go to some of the schools, now that what is happening in America is seeping through in Africa, and you have some people who don't want to see the rosary because it's one of the ways that they can fight against the church. You have teachers who are not Catholics teaching in Catholic schools. They will tell their kids, don't wear the rosary. But it's a common thing to see them do this. So in Africa, it's easy to see that. In Africa, again in Ghana particularly, seminarians who have prepared themselves to be priests, go for pastorals, what we call pastoral assignment, for either 5 weeks or 6 months. Here is what it is. I told you about mission churches. So a seminarian is assigned to a particular mission church for 5 weeks. He lives with the people. He shares faith with them. If he's a seminarian and he's an alcoholic, he can do communal service. If he's not an alcoholic, he's supposed to share what he has learned in the seminary with the people. You stay with the people, you eat what they eat, they take care of you. So already when you become a priest, going trekking is not a problem because you have learned to do it even as a seminarian. Again, in Ghana, the use of what we call lay catechists is very helpful. They are catechists, lay people who have been trained to be catechists. And in fact, they are the people in charge of the mission churches. Because the priest goes trekking from one place to another. In the absence of the priest, it is the catechists that conduct services. You conduct in the liturgy of the word and share the word with them, they pray and they go. The question is that, why would people attend such mass if they won't receive communion? But yet they go. I'm sure here, if it was the case, many people will not come because many go to church because of the communion. And it's not only that. As Catholics, we don't go to church because the word should feed us into it. If for pastoral reasons a priest cannot be there, it doesn't mean that you don't have to go to church. But in Africa, this happens. So catechists are also a huge help to the evangelization drive. They go to church not because it's an obligation to go and receive communion. They go to church because they need to be there. I want to conclude by addressing some counterclaims. Some may use to diminish the evangelical successes in the African church. Some have this to say, I'm sure you have heard them, that there are poor people in Africa. That's true. And so they are less educated. Therefore, they turn out to be more religious. That is a fallacy. There are rich people who are more religious. Because they are poor and they are less educated, it makes them more religious. I don't think that is the case. But that is the argument of some people again. Some have also said that the increase in vocation in African church is as a result of economic hardships and unemployment, and not because of genuine zeal for God. People have put these arguments out there. The answer is again so clear, obvious. Western condescension. Nothing good can come from Africa. Like the typical Jew, can anything good come from Nazareth? Yes, we are poor, but we still recognize who God is in our lives. And so we are ready at any time to worship Him. Whether we have it or not, we will still recognize that He's our Maker. Yes, we are poor, but still support the work of evangelization with commitment. At least we heard the gospel this evening, right? We all heard it. But do you know that in Ghana, parishioners give offering at every celebration, whether it's morning mass, whether it's benediction, whenever you go to church, you put in offering. No matter how small it is, they will still go, even though they are poor, they will still go to church, knowing that when I go to church, I have to put in offering. It never prevents them, but they will still go. In our case, we don't have a situation where after putting collection in for a year, we demand receipt for tax returns. We don't do that. That is the right sense of giving. We don't do that, but yet we go to church. But that is the argument people put, that because we are poor, we tend to be more religious. No, that's not it. But again, do you know how many African priests and religious who have doctorate and master's degrees teaching in higher institutions and still are priests? If it's about economic hardship and going around it, then they would have left and make a living. And they don't even know that there are a lot of people who leave their well-paid jobs and become priests in Africa. So I do not seem to agree with that. To conclude, I want to borrow Bishop Barron's words again. He says that it is time the West and American church came down from their high horses and sit at the feet of the African church and learn from them, for they are doing something good in evangelization. Thank you for listening.